What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the shop. Warm holiday welcome to you. For those who are new to the shop, I'm Josh Orchard, just trying to build some model airplanes and have some fun here in my own personal home. Today, before we get started, I have to say we have lost a shopmate. For those of you who know my family personally, we lost our little kitty cat Toto. We've had him for the past 12 years. Called him Toto because he had an extra toe, and he's not a dog. So it fits our family's personality quite well. He was old and had some health problems, and so now he's in our backyard. So whenever we do testing in the backyard, we will always remember our shop friend. So moving on from there. Thank you so much for those who have expressed kind words to that in social media, but we're going to move along because that's the way life works. So today we're going to be talking about my Bumblebee. Now, because this airplane is so big, so I got a couple of things I need to talk to you guys about first, and then we can get to some beauty shots around this thing. First and foremost, the painting is done. The only thing that's really left is the cockpit. So the cockpit, I want to add maybe a little bit of details, but in looking in historical references, there really isn't much in the cockpits of these airplanes. You're talking about maybe 4 dials, like gauges total. Okay, that's it. And most of it was obscured because of the support brackets that they installed for guns. So there you go. There's, in looking at what you really see mostly inside of this airplane is actually the fuel tank. The fuel tank was literally right in front of the pilot. That's what his knees were jammed up against. So, cockpit details are not going to be great. My buddy Carl, he's phenomenal with painting biologics. I am not. I'm good with finishing and doing some weathering and things like that, but natural stuff I struggle with. So he kindly offered to paint a pilot for me. So he's doing that. We'll wait on that. That'll be the cherry on the top, but until then, I want to go over some of the details that we've included in this airplane. So moving around the airplane, I just want to emphasize that this really does look like a Bumblebee, and that's for good reason. We've got great visibility, so be able to tell orientation, but also be able to actually see it, because sometimes when the airplane's in the sky, it's just hard to see where it is. Granted, it's a large airplane, but it makes life easier. You can see in my shop, I have several yellow airplanes. It's a good visual reference. So part of the reason I chose this scheme was because I would be able to see it. Now, some of these reinforcement things you can see more easily than others, but I do want to note this inspection rung. So they would use this rung as a foot step up to the empennage and do inspection of the control wires and such for safety or whatever. Also, we've got a little tiny windscreen with some paint on it, just a little tiny detail. This is actually laminating, like business card laminating stuff that I just ran the hot roller or just cut it out because that's what I had. We've got some tubing that's been painted brown for the cockpit combing. Obviously, we've got 3D printed spandaus. Turned out pretty nice. Really happy with that. Obviously, this Zor prop being scale is just absolutely phenomenal. I love it. I wish I could get some more of this brassy, coppery looking paint. Nobody seems to have much modeling paint in stock. So that's something to work out in the future. Loving the radial. Loving it. The wheels, I decided to go a little bit off scale because number one, when you're taking off for landing and seeing this rotate, it's way cooler than just plain yellow. So I didn't want to be boring. Moving along, we have cockpit entry step and another inspection step as well. And we've got Acrylic von Finley Slayer. So that is the name of our pilot, because for those of you who may not remember, my buddy Mike had a close encounter with the P-47.
Mistake, thankfully, before I hit him.
So that's the running joke there. It's just a little fun fact. So with the fuselage gone over, we've got standard markings with the crosses, nothing too overly dramatic. I have not included the struts for the tail, don't need them. So we're going to get the wing out and I'll show you the wing. And this is the wing. So no, it's not really a whole lot to look at now, but I wanted to show you up close because with the bright sun, some of these details can get washed out. So obviously we've got crosses on each end that are these are scale markings, properly sized as well. So really the technique here was to just take paint and brush it on, and I left it very thin on purpose. Why? Because typically when you had a pilot that was sufficiently skilled enough, remember these wings were covered in plywood, okay? These were not covered in canvas. They would just replace the whole wing, right? And when they were in the field and replaced the whole wing, well, they've got to paint it, and they painted these in the field. And obviously some resources were a little bit strictly hard to find, kind of like today's world. Anyway, we've got a thin coat of paint, and it gives it a nice texture, so visually it's going to look great in the air as well as on the ground. I could have gone darker and heavier, but I think some of this detail looks a little bit visually more striking, gives a little bit more depth. Now I will say that the top was pretty easy. The bottom not quite as easy because of those. So yeah, not fun. Anyway, I like the diagonal, and that was a visual nod to an artist's impression of this wing, and I like how splotchy it looks. You can see where some areas are darker than others, and that's intentional because that's the way it would have been, right? If this was done just in a very thin coat just to get some basic color on the airplane, it's the way. These were not, they didn't have spray cannons, okay? These were hand painted airplanes. So brush marks, yes, absolutely, there would be brush marks on these airplanes. Maybe this is a little exaggerated. I don't have measurements of the size of the bristles from the 19-teens, so I could look that up, but again, not the full intent of this airplane. It's good enough. Good enough. All right, so the last thing I need to talk about in terms of paint is what paint I used, what methods I used, and why. So the second one I've kind of alluded to already. Everything on this airplane is hand brushed. Hand brushed. The reason that I do that is because of the imperfections that you naturally create in that process. Far too often I go up to a World War I airplane and it looks too perfect. These were not mass manufactured aircraft the way we would think of mass manufactured today. Essentially, these were like coach built, very bespoke, if you will, airplanes. So each airplane was ever so slightly different, number one, but the paint was unique for every airplane, number two. And number three, each airplane as it would fly a sortie would experience different battle damage and different malfunctions or weather or all sorts of things can happen to these airplanes. So that is why I wanted to try to capture some of that more human aspect in the machine by doing hand brushed. Would it have been faster to go with my airbrush or something else? Maybe. But number two, well, it's cold outside, so doing that outside would have been not fun, and I'm not doing it inside again until I get an enclosed room, because the last time I did that, the air circulated through the whole house and I got paint everywhere. So yeah, you've been warned, for those who are married. All right, so the paint that I used acrylic. Why did I use acrylic? Okay, so I decided to not go with a rattle can for two reasons. Number one, I wanted the brushed look, so that obviously easily takes it out of the equation. But the propellant in spray cans, they usually use acetone. So if you have any imperfection, like you didn't quite fill your weave of fiberglass with just the right amount of sanding sealer, any sort of imperfection, that acetone is going to go in, eat right through the foam. So since I decided to not use a strictly filled and smooth finish, if you get really close, you can see, oh, it's really hard because of the brush strokes. Let me try to get a different angle here, a different angle of light. There, you can see some of the pinholes here. That light is making it look very dramatic on the camera. So that's the kind of thing that you want to see up close as you get closer, because again, cloth covered wood. Okay, so being able to capture some of that texture in the surface was something else I wanted to add depth, because again, it's those subtle differences that you look at the airplane in one light and then you come back like 3 hours later when the light is different, it's going to look slightly different. So another little trick that I do is I try to capture those kinds of little things. The linens, they make a big difference. And in the German aircraft, the weave of the linen was thicker than that of the British aircraft or even the French aircraft. Those used a much more fine thread for the weave of their linens, whereas the Germans, it was much more about strength and durability and rigidity and making a tough machine. Now anyway, I could get into a big. We're getting sidetracked. I used acrylic because acrylic thins with water. And so if I wanted a thinner mix of the acrylic to help capture that texture, it was a lot easier to manage, especially with water. Easy cleanup on a paintbrush. With a paintbrush, I'm down here painting, like 30 minutes at a time. Got to go take care of family stuff. Got to go do something else. I can easily clean up the brush, and I don't have to worry so much about, oh my gosh, this is oil based, or I dropped a little bit on the floor. I can do some cleanup to a certain extent. So that's why I chose acrylic. Also, acrylics are pretty readily available at this point. I mean, I picked up this olive green. This is a 4-ounce bottle, which I didn't even use the whole thing on, and it covered the entire wing. And I still have quite a bit left. So I picked up some yellow. See, this is daffodil yellow, and brown and black. And I tried using this antique green chalk because I was kind of curious about like a matte finish. Wrong shade of green. The olive is where it's at. So yeah, that's why I chose the acrylic, but also the acrylic will also help because it's a thicker paint. It will help fill that weave as well and help fill in some of the sealing that may have been missed by the sanding sealer. So again, that's the reason there. So now I'm gonna put the airplane together, and we'll do some walk around and talk around as well. All right, so here it is. You're gonna see my shadow. Hi. But here she is in the sunlight. Again, kind of hard to tell how big she is unless you have something sizable next to it for comparison. But I just love the way it looks. Love it. And again, you can sort of see the splotchiness of the wing, and it works well with the fuselage. It's got a good profile. Really, really happy with it. Now, one other thing that I've done here inside the landing gear, since I used smaller diameter wire because I knew it was going to be a bit lighter, the springiness of the wire was not quite springy enough, so I did print some TPU, like a little spongy block thing, to help do some shock absorbing inside there for the wheel. And then speaking of weight, the weight is insane. So the weight on this airplane, okay, 9 pounds and 7 ounces. 9 pounds, 7 ounces. That's without battery. Batteries is, roughly 2 pounds, depending on the battery that I use. 1 pound. One battery pack is 1 pound 15 ounces. One is 1 pound 14.5 ounces. Another is 2 pounds 2 ounces. Just say 2 pounds. So even after you figure the maximum weight of the batteries that I currently would fly on this airplane, you're talking 11.9 pounds, or 11 pounds 9 ounces. Yeah, 11 pounds 9 ounces. That's still underweight for the Balsa USA kit by like 1/4 pound. Almost half a pound. So crazy that you can do it for that amount of weight, which is just, it blows my mind. Now, I will say that yes, the paint did add some tail weight to it, so our CG has shifted aft a little bit. I want to try to fly it again. It's not so dramatically so that the tail is sagging. It literally has only shifted by like 3 millimeters in terms of the CG, okay? So it's not a huge deal. Don't think that, every drop of paint, this heavy acrylic paint that I'm adding to the tail is going to make it so dramatically tail heavy. No, it's not. A lot of what's inside acrylic paint is water, and it evaporates when it dries. It's the beauty of water-based paints. All right, so 2 more things we need to cover. Number 1 is cold in the neighborhood because it's winter and I want to get back in the shop, and I've got to go over some things that I neglected. All right, so the last couple things I really need to touch base with you guys on. First and foremost, yes, I did make a wing bag. I make wing bags out of moving blankets you can order on Amazon. They're stupid cheap, and a little bit of time and some time on a sewing machine. I've done a video on that. And the next thing is, because I was in a rush to get the airplane built and flown, I didn't cover at all how I made the cowl. And I feel like I've done a disservice there because this was supposed to show you how to do everything. And the cowl was unique because it didn't use any standard size foam. So I'll just show you. So the way that it is essentially constructed is that there's a plywood plate, right? And then on that plywood plate, there are a couple of standoffs. And I just used a couple pieces of balsa just because I wanted something rigid. And then so normally you would construct it with several different pieces of thick balsa wood and then carve that to shape. And any way you looked at it, those little slices were not standard size foam, and the stack of it was not standard size foam either, but it was less than 2 inches by that much. So I took a piece of 2-inch foam, just a chunk, roughly the size that I needed, and sliced off that much with my hot wire bow. And then I started to shape it using my rasping file. It made a huge holy mess, but it easily vacuums up. And then you start sanding it, and any imperfections that you have, you just fill with some spackle. But before I did the shaping, I took a piece of foam board and did the skin on that gap between the base and the chunk of pink foam. I've got pictures I'm obviously showing you guys this with as I talk, but I didn't cover that. That was my bad, and so I apologize for that. But now I have this piece of obscure foam in my shop to do with I don't know what. We'll figure it out. Probably go in the garbage. The other thing I didn't talk at all about that I really should have, that it's a minor detail, but I feel like I'm doing a disservice. It involves silverware. So silverware. Okay, so hinges. When you do your hinges with Gorilla Glue, okay, Gorilla Glue expands, okay? How do you avoid it expanding where you don't want it to go? Okay, this is something that I talk with people all the time about at events. You can control it with tape to prevent it from expanding out into someplace else, but what if it's someplace critical that's functional or operational that you don't want it to be? The best way I can tell you is some sort of oil or Vaseline. Okay, this is an old school trick that a lot of newer builders don't really know about. This is just an old spoon, and it's metal, has to be metal, because you heat the spoon, okay? You take a scoop of Vaseline and you heat up the bottom of it, and then it gets all melty, and you've got liquid Vaseline, okay? And then you take the hinge and you dip it into the Vaseline, and then you work the hinge until it gets solid again. The Vaseline has cooled down. You have to do that because any other way it's just going to interfere with everything. So you can do it with oil. Oil is honestly, you can do it in a pinch, but it's not a guarantee every time. The guarantee every time is Vaseline. The spoon trick is the bee's knees, so to speak, considering the theme of the airplane. Absolutely do this trick. It's not, you can even use Vicks, okay? So Vicks Vapo Rub is just like a mentholated petroleum jelly. It's really quite the same thing. So you can do that if you have to do it in a pinch. It's probably the more expensive way to go, honestly. But that is the way to do it. Just bend the hinges, dip it into that liquid Vaseline, and you're good to go. It doesn't take much, but anytime you're gluing in hinges, it helps get the glue away from the hinge so that it doesn't glue the hinge in one position or like it'll get bound up. That helps a lot too. But in this particular case, since we were using the expanding foam glue, Gorilla Glue, to glue in hinges to foam, and then on top of that, we're painting. And on top of that, before we're painting, we're sanding, so there's all this dust and debris and everything. Using the Vaseline trick, I have had no issues with the hinges, guys. So that's really it. That's what I had to square up with you. So I'm going to close out the video here. Thank you so very much for following along on this journey. It has been so fun getting back to my foam roots and sharing that with you guys. Doing something with foam board. I did something with foam board about a year ago, but I didn't post any videos on it. And I am a big proponent of building something scale. I think that anybody can build something with any medium, and you can do it to a satisfactory level. And I am certainly happy with this airplane. How it flies is amazing. How it looks is amazing. And you know what? I've got story to share this airplane with when I go to events, and that is going to be amazing. So until next time, guys, make sure that you are working on your flying works of art.